Hello. Um, I'm not going to make this very long, but I want to cut straight to the point. Today, well, actually, just passed. The 1st of October is China's National Day. That is the People's Republic of China. Obviously, very different connotations in Taiwan. But anyway, in the People's Republic of China, this is the day in 1949 that Mao Zedong declared People's Republic of China's foundation. This wasn't the beginning of the Republic, of course. That came with the Shanghai Revolution in 1911, 1912. Um, but nevertheless, the events of 49 were very significant. The Communist Party had won the Civil War, and they had complete control of China at this point. Mao was, of course, party secretary, paramount leader, and so on. Um, I never sort of take into account this day. I mean, obviously I take it into account, but I never celebrate it. When it comes to things like Mid-Autumn Festival, Spring Festival, and so on, I always wish my Chinese friends to have a good holiday, but I can't bring myself to do it for this event. Why? Um, Not because I don't recognize Chinese republicanism, I do, but I basically resent 66 years of lies, which is what it amounts to. Um, there's so much to be said, I can't contain it all in one video, but basically, you can point out all the good things the Communist Party has done. That is, if you're a communist or if you're sympathetic to them, you can point out how they've lifted millions of people out of poverty, how they've improved women's rights and issues like this. And no doubt they have done some good things. But in my opinion, that doesn't justify the nightmare they cause many Chinese citizens, many, many, many people. Mao's regime was absolutely one of the worst of the 20th century. There's no question about that. And I'll just cite one example to demonstrate how callous and dishonest this regime was. In 1956, there was a campaign launched, which was translated into English as a Hundred Flowers campaign. This is basically an initiative by Mao to find out who his dissenters were. On the surface, it was an exercise in brief democracy, i.e., it was an opportunity for dissidents to openly voice their opinions on surface without repercussions. So hundreds of intellectuals. The 100 flowers was meant to be 100 flowers of thought, like flowers blooming. Intellectuals speaking out their views. So they did, and they were very critical of party policy, um, which had resulted in many, many big problems at this point. I highly recommend the documentary Mao's Great Famine, which can be found online. And it basically talks about this. But basically, Mao used that as an opportunity to find out who his enemies were and to cynically expose them. Um, and what followed was firstly the Great Leap Forward, so called, which was actually resulting in the most devastating famine in human history. Conservative estimates put it at an absolute minimum of 30 million dead. Most statistics now estimate around 45 million. This is a very famous book, Tombstone, published in Hong Kong. The writer is this man, um, Yang Zhisheng. Apologies if I'm pronouncing Chinese names wrong. But basically, he's writing this as a testament to all those who died, including his father. 1958 to 1961 was known as the Three Bitter Years. Harvest Field, it was absolutely catastrophic. But this is directly as a result of Mao's economic policies and his collectivist policies. Um, Not very long after that, 1966 to 1976, but especially in the late 60s, came the Cultural Revolution, which was one of the darkest chapters, in my opinion, of human persecution in the 20th century. Literally millions were shamed, driven to suicide, purged, denounced as capitalist roaders, lynched, beaten to death. This was an absolutely savage time. Most Chinese citizens have some knowledge of this, when I was over there, my students tended to describe it as a civil conflict. They certainly didn't describe it as a period of persecution, which is what it was. Um, but basically, and by the way, there's very good reason why this is banned in China, because the Communist Party doesn't like to allow any opinions that are critical of themselves. Um, I love China. Um, there's a lot of things I love about China. I feel very close to this country. But the dishonesty of the Communist Party has to be something that is near the top of the list of things I find very hard to tolerate. And to this day, Mao's time is excused. The Communist Party say he made mistakes. He was 75% good, 25% bad. But the average Chinese citizen today, with the exception of some older generations, and even they are not universal, I'm speaking here from experience, from what I have seen, um, tend to be passive on Mao. We have this idea that he's still venerated. That's not entirely true. The party still venerates him, and they still try to encourage the public to venerate him. And it's true, you go into rural China, you'll find portraits in almost every house. You'll certainly find a lot of Mao memorabilia. You'll find little red books selling at tourist stands and so on. So there's all of that Mao tech. But I genuinely don't think the average Chinese citizen today loves Mao. Maybe some older people do. But young Chinese tend to be passive about him, and older Chinese who lived through his terror, and many of them are interviewed in this documentary, I haven't heard them praising Mao once. They all celebrate how hard those days were. It's well known that many of the Red Guards today, they're now middle-aged people, have lived lifetimes of regret and guilt at what they done, at their part in that persecution. But the truth is, they were naive young people who didn't know any better. Mao knew full well what he was doing. And in my opinion, the only way for a country to really move forward is to truly confront its past. In the case of China, it would be extremely painful because the sheer level of suffering defies comprehension. We're talking about tens of millions of people dying unnecessarily. When people say that the population of China increased in Mao's time, my answer is, well, do the ends justify the means? So just because the population increased, does that justify tens of millions of dead? I would say absolutely not. My simple response to Mao apologists would be, whatever good he done, there is no disputing that the Communist Party today continues to hide the truth. They continue to censor history. And I still think it's incredibly hypocritical to lecture Japan about being open about its past. And we all know Japan's got a very dark past. But it's incredibly hypocritical to preach to Japan about that whilst being incredibly dishonest themselves. So whenever the National Day is announced, the first thing I think about is the terror, especially of Mao's years. And because the Xi administration is promoting a neo-nationalism, you get a lot of cyber netizens who don't like to hear these things, especially when it comes from a foreigner. Their attitude is, oh, you're a pesky foreigner, you don't know what you're talking about. But I've been studying this for years, and I much prefer to take the word of Chinese dissidents who have risked their lives to expose this stuff, rather than a party that is built on lies. It doesn't matter what they have done that is good, because the shame of the Chinese Communist Party is 66 years of lies, of censorship, of persecution and repression. I'm not saying it's all bad, but in my view, the negative side is very negative. And I really hope that one day in the future, I don't want to say a chaotic situation. I'm not calling for the Communist Party to be violently overthrown or anything like that. But I do want to see more truth in China. I do want to see these things, if not openly discussed, at least see information freely available in Chinese libraries. I know that's wishful thinking, and I believe it will take years. I'll probably be an old man before that happens, if it ever happens. But that's the only way any country could go forward. And you can point out and talk about all the moral wrongs of Britain's past or America's past. The fundamental difference is, as societies, you cannot compare the level of openness, because I guarantee you, any negative aspect of our history, we can openly look up. There are books about all those negative things to do with the British Empire, to do with Americans' treatment of Native Americans and all that sort of thing. That information is openly available. In China, the only source of information that is freely available is communist propaganda, and that is a simple fact. Sometimes telling the truth isn't easy when you're in a minority, and for dissidents in China, it's very dangerous actually. Not only do they face persecution from the authorities, but they also face the wrath of a very nationalized population. Not to say that everyone is like that, but that faction is pretty strong. And I just think it's very, very sad. So it's shameful that the Communist Party, not only that they've done these things in the first place, but they continue to venerate this tyrant. I'll leave it there.